What's up, guys? Welcome to our final section in this basic networking course. This is our capstone. We're going to be completing the configuration of a branch office and a headquarters. Prerequisites for this is all the things that the videos before this have taught you, such as how to upload and copy a configuration to a device, basic switch and router setup, routing, including gateway of last resort, static routes, dynamic routes with OSPF, port security, VLANs, DHCP, port channels, access control lists, and NAT, PAT, and port forwarding. So before we hop into this, make sure that you go down to the link in the video description below and download this for yourself, either for your notes or to attempt it on your own. And let's go ahead and take a look at our network diagram here. Over here on this side, we're going to have a branch office. And then that's going to be connected to our internet that we're simulating right here. And then to our internet, we're going to have our headquarters coming off of that as well. So this video, we're going to be focusing on these branch office tasks right here. So without further ado, let's hop into this. Task number 1 says using the management laptop, console into and restore the HR router's configuration via TFTP from the HR server named HR Backup. Before we can connect to the TFTP server, we'll need to configure the internal interface with the network's first usable IP address. And then after configuration is successfully loaded, we won't need to do any more configuration on this router. Sounds good. Let's move down here. Here's our HR router right here. So let's go ahead and grab our management laptop. Let's go ahead and connect it with a console cable. So we'll hook up to this RS-232, and then we'll hook into the router's console port. We hop into the laptop, into the desktop. We can go into the terminal here, click OK. We are inside of that router. Let's go ahead and get into global configuration mode. We'll hop into that interface G001, which is that inside interface. We'll go ahead and give it an IP address of 192.168.0.193, which is the first one in the HR subnet with a 255.255.255.224 subnet mask. Make sure we issue the no shut to bring it up. Hop out of here, back to privileged exec mode. Go ahead and top this so it doesn't disappear on us, and let's fast forward to make that link come up faster. Looks like it's green now. So now let's go ahead and copy that configuration. We'll go ahead and do copy TFTP to our startup config. The address, we're going to be hitting that HR server at 192.168.0.200. And the file name they said is HR Backup. We want to copy that to the startup config, so we'll hit enter there. And we'll let it go to work. Looks like that's been successfully done. So now what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and reload this device so that all those configuration changes that we just loaded in can take effect. Go ahead and say no, and then enter. This can take a moment for that device to reload. And now that that awkward silence is over, let's hop back in here and let's go ahead and do a show run just to make sure that we have configuration on here that we loaded in. So we can see we have a local account on the device, a domain. We can see both of our interfaces are configured and they have the no shut issued on them. And we also see we have some NAT configured, as well as an access list, and it looks like our virtual lines are also configured. So that looks good for task number 1. Let's go ahead and check out task number 2. Task 2 says the rest of the branch office needs to be configured. Utilize the management laptop to console into each router apart from the HR one and each switch and perform basic configuration, including IPs for in-use interfaces. The accounting router, it says here, will need sub-interfaces for the VLANs. So we got to remember that. And then we need to set all these devices up for access via SSH. So user Cisco, password Cisco, domain Cisco. So let's go ahead and hop into that. So let's go ahead and start with the HR switch right here. Go ahead and hook this into that console port. Back into our laptop terminal. Get into global configuration mode. We'll go ahead and start with a host name. We'll just call it HR switch. Go ahead and give it an enable secret of Cisco. A local account with username Cisco, password Cisco. Let's give it IP domain name of Cisco so that we can configure SSH. And from here we can go ahead and do our crypto key, generate RSA. Make sure we up that modulus to 2048 at the minimum. Then from here we can hop into our line VTY 0 through 15. Go ahead and do a login local so that it uses that local account, and then transport input, input SSH. And we can hop out of here and hop into our VLAN 1. And here for this IP, we're actually going to give it an IP address in the switch management range right here. So we'll go IP add 192.168.0.234. 255.255.255.252. That'll be in that switch management network. And then we'll no shut that. Go ahead and hop out of here and let's do a quick show run just to verify that our changes have been made and look good. And they do. All right, let's go ahead and hop into our next device. Let's go to the branch edge router right here. Hook up to that console port. Back into our terminal. Go ahead and hop into global configuration mode. Go ahead and do the same task. We'll give it a host name, branch edge router. We'll give it that enable secret of Cisco. A local account with username Cisco, password Cisco. We need that IP domain name for our crypto keys. And then we can go ahead and generate those. Crypto key, generate RSA. Make sure it's 2048 at least. From here we can hop into our virtual lines. Line VTY 0 to 4 on a router. Log in local to use that local account, and then transport input SSH. Now we can hop out of here and hop into interface G001. Give it an IP address. If we look at that network that we've got right here, we'll go ahead and give it 192.168.0.226 because the other router had 225 with 255.255.255.252. Oh, of course we've got to do IP add so that we can actually add an IP address. Then we can no shut that interface to bring it up. Next we should hop into interface G000. Look at that network that we've got for that section right there. So we'll go ahead and give it an IP address of 192.168.0.229 with that /30 subnet mask. No shut on that one as well. And finally we'll hop into our interface S011 that heads out of our network. And it looks like the IP address that we want there is 20.20.20.2 255.255.255.252. And no shut on that one as well. Go ahead and hop out of here and do a show run just to look at our configuration. Looks like all our interfaces that we needed have IP addresses on them. Everything looks good. Let's go ahead and hop into our next device now, which will be this accounting and sales router. Hook into that console port, back to our terminal. Move this out of the way so we can see. And once again, we're going to be repeating a lot of those same basic setup tasks. So into global configuration mode, give it a host name. We'll call this one accounting sales router. Enable secret of Cisco. A local account with username Cisco, password of Cisco. IP domain name Cisco, so we can make those keys, which we'll do with crypto key generate RSA 2048. Now we'll hop into our virtual lines, line V2I 0 to 4, login local, transport input SSH. From here we can go ahead and hop into our interfaces, interface G000. We look at that network that's connected there. It's going to be this one right here. We'll give it an IP add of 192.168.0.230 because that edge router got the 229 IP address. Make sure we add that subnet mask. No shut to bring that up. Then we can hop into interface G001. Now with this one, we're going to be configuring sub-interfaces. So from here, all we want to do is bring this interface up, and then we'll go ahead and hop into G001.10 because it looks like our VLANs are going to be 10 and 20. So we'll hop into the first sub-interface for VLAN 10. Make sure we do encapsulation.1q10. Then we can give it an IP address for that network of 192.168.0.1 with a subnet mask 255.255.255.128. Then we can go ahead and hop into that other sub interface G001.20. Give that encapsulation for the VLAN. So encapsulation.1q20. And then an IP address for that network of 192.168.0.129 with a 255.255.255.192 subnet mask for that /26. From here we can hop back to privileged exec mode and show our running configuration. Just observing that the changes we've made have taken effect and that our interfaces do have IP addresses on them. So that all looks good. Finally, we need to hop into this accounting and sales switch down here. So we'll go ahead and console into that. Exit out of this old session and hop into a new terminal session. Get into global configuration mode. And let's repeat all these steps again. Host name, this one's going to be accounting sales switch. We'll go ahead and give it an enable secret of Cisco, a local account with username Cisco, password Cisco, an IP domain name of Cisco, and then we've got to make those crypto keys. So crypto key generate RSA, make it 2048 at least. From here we can hop into those virtual lines, 0 through 15 on a switch, login local, and then transport input SSH to disable that telnet. Now we can go ahead and hop into that interface VLAN 1. Remember, for these we're giving them this switch management network. So we'll go ahead and go IP add 192.168.0.233 because our other switch got the 234 with that /30 subnet mask. And make sure we do a no shut on here to bring that interface up because by default VLAN 1 is administratively down. Go ahead and hop out of here and do a show run. Verify our configuration. And that looks good. Let's close out of here and let's move on to task number 3. Let's see what that has for us. Task 3 says create logical separation between the accounting and sales departments. Configure the supplied VLANs. Okay, so we're already connected to that switch. We're going to be making VLAN 10 and VLAN 20. So we hop back in here, back into our terminal session. Go ahead and get into global configuration mode. Create VLAN 10 with that VLAN 10 command. Name it accounting. Then create VLAN 20 and name it sales. Now we're going to go ahead and hop into interface range F01 through 2 so that we can assign those to the VLAN. So first we're going to go switch port mode access and then switch port access VLAN 10. Hop into that other range for VLAN 20 of F0 3 through 4. Of course we need the range keyword in there. issue those same commands that we just issued. Switch port mode access, switch port access VLAN 20 this time. Then from here we can hop into interface G0/1, which is connecting us to the router. And we're going to need to make this one switch port mode trunk because it's going to be allowing both of the VLANs to cross it. And then switch port trunk allowed VLAN 10 and 20. If we hop out of here, we can issue a few commands to verify this. First is show VLAN brief. There we can see we have our two VLANs, 10 and 20, and the ports are correctly in those VLANs. We can also do show interface trunk, and we see that we do have a trunk configured on port G01, and that's allowing both of our VLANs across it. So that looks good for that task. Let's go ahead and hop out of here and see what task 4 has. Task 4 says configure a gateway of last resort on the accounting and edge routers that sends traffic out of the network, and then configure static routes to each internal subnet on the edge router. Okay, let's go ahead and start by hopping into this accounting and sales router. Click that into the console port. Hop into our terminal. From here, we're going to go ahead and hop into global configuration mode. And then we'll go ahead and issue a static route, which is our gateway of last resort of 0.0.0.0, 0.0.0.0, and we'll point that out our G000 interface. That should be good. We go ahead and hop in to the branch edge router, console into that, back into our terminal. From here we get into global configuration mode. First thing we're going to do is that gateway of last resort, so IP route 0.0.0.0.0.0.0, heading out our S011 interface. Then we'll go ahead and do an IP route 192.168.0.0, 255.255.255.128 to get down into our accounting VLAN. So we'll go ahead and send that down to the accounting and sales router interface IP, which is 192.168.0.230. We'll add another route down to the sales VLAN of IP route 192.168.0.192, or sorry, 128 is that network, with 255.255.255.192. And we'll send that the same way to that next interface, 192.168.0.230. Finally, we'll add a route to the HR network with IP route 192.168.0.192, 255.255.255.224. And we're going to send that up to the HR router interface, which is 192.168.0.225. Go ahead and hop out of here and quickly do a show IP route to make sure that these work. And it looks like we have our gateway of last resort, and we have configured our static routes to all of those networks. So that should be good for that task. Moving on, task number 5 says HR is a sensitive department. Configure port security with a violation mode of shutdown, sticky MAC, and so only the currently connected devices are authorized on that department switch. Okay. Let's go ahead and disconnect from that branch edge and hop into the switch with a console. Get into our terminal here. Go ahead and get past our enable password of Cisco and then hop into global configuration mode. First thing we want to do is see which ports we're actually connected to. So since we're in global configuration mode, we'll go ahead and put do in front of our show IP interface brief command. And it looks like these first 4 ports are what we have connected. So we're going to want to shut all the other unused ports down. So G01 also seems to be connected to our router probably. So we'll go ahead and go interface, range, F05 through 24. And we'll also grab G02. Go ahead and shut those down. Next, we'll hop into interface range F01 through 4 for the ports that are in use. We'll change those to switch port mode access so we can put port security on them. And then we'll do switch port, port-security. We'll follow that with switch port, port-security, MAC-address, sticky, so that it learns the addresses that are currently connected to it. Of course, if we spell it right, that will help. Okay, looks good. Now with those being sticky and learned by being connected, we need to restrict that to only allow one connected device, which is the one that's currently connected. So we'll go ahead and issue switch port, port security, maximum 1. And then it said to make our violation modes shut down. So switch port, port-security, violation, shutdown. That should be good for there. Let's hop out and verify that by doing show port-security. Looks like we have correctly put those first 4 ports to be monitored by port security, and we will shut them down if there's a security violation. So that looks good. Let's move on to task number 6 now. It says configure the edge router to provision DHCP to all departments. There's a hint here. It says use a separate pool for each network. That could be important. We're going to exclude the first 10 addresses in each subnet. The interior accounting router is going to need to help with DHCP. And then we're going to want to enter each PC and configure it to receive its IP via DHCP. Okay, so if we move down here, go ahead and move our console cable into the branch edge router. Hop back into our terminal. We're going to want to hop into global configuration mode here. And let's go ahead and start by excluding our addresses, the first 10 in each network that we have. So we'll go IP DHCP excluded address. We'll start with the accounting, so 192.168.0.1 through 192.168.0.10. Next, let's go ahead and exclude the sales, so 192.168.0.129 through 192.168.0.138. And finally, let's exclude our HR's first 10 addresses of 192.168.0.193 through 192.168.0.202. Now that we've excluded those, let's go ahead and start making our pools. So we'll go IP DHCP pool, start with the HR pool. That will be a network, gotta spell it right, of 192.168.0.192, subnet mask 255.255.255.224. And we're gonna wanna make sure that we give it a default router of its local HR router, which would be 192.168.0.193. Now let's go ahead and make an IP DHCP pool for our accounting. That network is going to be 192.168.0.0 with a 255.255.255.128 subnet mask, and that default router is going to be 192.168.0.1. Finally, let's go ahead and do our sales network. So that's going to be a DHCP pool for sales, and the network is 192.168.0.128 255.255.255.192 subnet mask with a default router of 192.168.0.129. We go ahead and hop out of here. We can verify that we've made those pools by doing the show IP DHCP pool command. We look here, we do indeed have an HR pool with the given addresses, an accounting pool, as well as a sales pool. Okay, now we're not done yet. We're going to need to hop over and plug into our accounting and sales router. Hop back into this interface. get into global configuration mode. And then we're going to want to hop into interface G000.10 for our counting VLAN. And we're going to go ahead and do IP helper dash address of 192.168.0.229, which is that branch edge router address that's connected to this router. Then we'll hop into interface G000.20 for the sales VLAN and do the same thing, IP helper dash address 192.168.0.229. And then from here we should be good to complete the final part of this task, which says enter each PC and configure it to receive IP via DHCP. So if we've done this correctly, we should be able to hop into these computers, into their desktops, and click on DHCP. The first time might fail with Packet Tracer, but hopefully we did this correctly. Let's go ahead and retry that first one. And we have grabbed a DHCP address. That's great. Let's go ahead and do that with the rest of our computers really quick. That one got one. And that one's good too. So HR looks good. Let's come down to accounting and see if this worked. This is more tricky because we had to configure those sub interfaces to be helper addresses. Okay, the first time failed. Let's try again. Okay, so it looks like we failed to do this correctly for these. So let's go ahead and do some troubleshooting. So if we hop into our laptop again, back into our terminal, let's go ahead and do show run. And let's see what our interfaces are configured for. If we look here, it looks like we've got interface G000.10 and 000.20, but if we look over here, those are actually our other interface. So we've configured these two interfaces incorrectly, but that's no worries. What we can do is we can go ahead and go into interface G001.10. Of course, we need to be in global configuration mode for that. Now we can hop into that interface, give it the encapsulation .1Q that it needs for VLAN 10, and the IP address that it's supposed to have, 192.168.0.229. Sorry, that's wrong. This one would actually be 192.168.0.1 with 255.255.255.128. Then if we hop into our interface G001.20 and give that an IP address, well, first we're going to have to get some encapsulation for that VLAN. Don't forget that. VLAN 20. Then we can give it an IP address 192.168.0.129, 255.255.255.192. And while we're in here, we might as well do our IP helper dash address of 192.168.0.229. Let's hop back into interface G001.10 and do the same thing, IP helper dash address 192.168.0.229. And then let's go ahead and get into the overall interface G001 and no shut to bring it online and make sure that it's up. Now that we've fixed those changes, let's go ahead and hop back into our PC over here and see if we can get a DHCP address. And we did, so that means we fixed those changes, which is good. Let's go ahead and give the next computer a DHCP address. That worked. Alright, last of our networks. Cross our fingers. Good, that's successful. Final computer. Perfect. So we hit a roadblock, but we were able to fix it and figure out the issue. That's something common that can happen. You've always got to make sure that you're configuring the correct interface for the purpose that you're trying to achieve. So now we can go ahead and move on to task number 7. Task 7 says configure the edge router to participate in OSPF on its exterior interface. Do not advertise any routes. We don't want the internet to know about our internal network design. Okay, that should be fairly straightforward. Go ahead and connect our console cable here. Hop into our terminal. I'm going to go ahead and go into global configuration mode. And then we'll start our OSPF process with router OSPF. We'll just call it number 1. Then we can go ahead and exit out of there and hop into interface S011 and do IP OSPF 1 area 0. Because that is the area that it's in out here. Now if we hop out of here, looks like we just got a neighbor. Let's verify with show IP OSPF neighbor. And we did. We can also do show IP route to see if we've learned any routes from that. And it looks like we have learned quite a few routes from OSPF, so that's great. Let's go ahead and move on to task number 8. It says configure PAT on the edge router so that all users in the branch office can access the internet. Overload the edge router's external interface address. Okay, so we're already in the edge router right here with our PC. Let's go ahead and move this out of the way. So we need to configure PAT for all these devices in here. So the first thing we're going to do when we're configuring network address translation is define our interfaces. So if we hop into S011 from global configuration mode, interface S011, we can say IP NAT outside. This is outside of our network. Then we can hop into interface G001. Let's actually just do them both at the same time. Interface range G000 through 1. These are going to be IP NAT inside our network. After we've done that, let's go ahead and configure an access list for our local pool of addresses or our private addresses that we want translated. So we'll go access list 1 permit 192.168.0.0 with a wildcard of 0.0.0.255. Then we can go ahead and create our NAT. So IP NAT inside source is going to be that access list number 1, and we're going to use interface S011 and overload it to perform this action. So if we go ahead and end right here, we can do show IP NAT statistics, and from here we can see our outside interface is S011 and we have two inside interfaces of G000 and 001. So that looks good. So I think we're ready to move on to task number 9, which essentially is just verifying that we've completed all of the other tasks successfully. So let's do some basic validation tests. First it says access the web server from here from one device in each internal network. So let's start on PC 8. Go ahead and hop into a web browser. Go ahead and enter that address, http://95.200.70.133. Enter. And we have successfully reached that internet web server from here. Let's go ahead and copy this address because we're going to be using it again. Let's hop down into accounting. Let's see if accounting can reach the internet. Go ahead and paste our address and hit enter. And it can. Alright, last VLAN, last network. Let's see if sales has access to the internet. Paste our address and hit enter. And it does. That's great. Let's see what else we have for task 9. It says ping between devices in each internal network. Okay, just to double check and make sure everything can talk. Let's go ahead and hop in here. Let's go ahead and do IP config/all. Let's see our IP address. We got 203, so that means these other two PCs we probably got 204 and 205. So let's go ahead and do ping 192.168.0.204, and we can talk within this local area network. That's great. Now let's go ahead and check down here, PC1. From here we're going to go ahead and ping the other PC, but let's see what our IP address is. So we got the .11, so the other one's probably .12. So let's ping 192.168.0.12, and we can talk to our neighbor there in the same VLAN. Let's see if we can talk to the other VLAN. So if we excluded those first 10 IP addresses, then these probably got handed out 139 and 140. So let's go ahead and ping 192.168.0.139. That might take a second because now it has to go up through the router and then back. But we do indeed have connectivity between those devices. Alright guys, so I know that this was a longer video. There was a lot of stuff that we had to configure in this portion of the lab. But if you successfully completed it, give yourself a pat on the back. That's great work. This is not the easiest material to comprehend, but I have tried to make it as simple as possible, and I'm glad that you've joined me all the way up to this point. We're not quite done yet. There is one more video where we're going to go ahead and hop over here to the headquarters and perform some more configuration. So make sure you stick around for that, and we'll see you in the next video.